it had just stopped. So I went from being told my patella is going to have to be surgically anchored to my knee, like my kneecap, that whole frame around my leg, to the pain had gone. I could have, if I didn't know about Carnivore, or hadn't been on Carnivore and seen the benefits it was having on me, I could have very well undergone a completely unnecessary surgical procedure that was fixed by eating meat.
Teeyana, how did you find Carnivore?
Um, I had actually heard about Carnivore probably around sort of 2017, 2018. I used to do Olympic weightlifting and was training, with a coach. I was doing sort of competition level, nothing too crazy, but at least, was trying to get into do sort of local competitions and stuff and for my own fitness and whatever. And at the time I was keto. I was doing a lot of keto and intermittent fasting. And because I was training so heavily, it was sort of, I think it was about 12 hours a week, something like that. But I was training quite heavy, and there were sort of 2-3 hour sessions, and I wanted something to be a little bit more optimal for my training. So I had heard about it then, but sort of in the keto space then, Carnivore seemed as if it was really extreme. Like at that particular time, keto was sort of extreme. Like, oh, what, you're cutting out the majority of your carbs, but then Carnivore was like sort of that extreme level. So I had heard about it, but I didn't look into it further or anything. And then my husband sort of said probably a year ago, because he loves Joe Rogan, he was listening to Joe Rogan. He said, "Oh, Joe was talking about being on Carnivore," and I was like, "Oh, okay," And he said, "Oh, maybe we should look into it." He said, because you used to do keto and you sort of know. And I was like, "Oh, okay." But that was our discussion. It was like, "Oh, okay, whatever." We just raised it and kept going. And anyway, then it sort of came up again early last year. And again, he said, "Oh, remember when we spoke about that Carnivore thing?" And he said, "I saw Joe talking about it with Dr. Peterson and something else." And he's like, "Let's look into it a little bit more." And I was like, "All right, fair enough." And that's exactly what we did. I think we started off maybe with Joe's, like a snippet of Joe's interview with Dr. Peterson or something. And then, you start getting all the recommended videos underneath. And Kerry from Homestead How popped up. So it's funny because Kerry credits Dante from Ferrigno. That was his driver, and Kerry was ours. So, we just kind of got into Carnivore from that. We saw Kerry, and of course, if you've seen Kerry's videos, he's so passionate and exuberant and has all this energy, and he's talking, and it just went from one video to another video to another video, and he was talking about everything, how it benefited him. And I think one of the first probably stories that we saw of Homestead House or Kerry's was the interview with Bill Knott. And when we saw that interview with Bill, we were just, because Bill had been on Carnivore for a few months at that point. I think maybe sort of 6 to 8 months at that point. So a good amount of time. And when we saw, how it was benefiting Bill, we were just gobsmacked. And then, so that was like a Monday, right? Monday evening. We actually didn't go to sleep that night. Or I think when we finally did, it was something like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, because we were, glued to YouTube. And of course, at that point, because you're starting to watch this, you're getting recommendations of every sort of creator. It was like yourself, Steak and Butter Gal, Laura Spath, like all these people just started getting recommended to us, and all the doctors, of course, Dr. Chafee, Dr. Berry, Dr. Philip Avadi, all of those people started getting recommended. So, the next day we woke up, and it wasn't like a somber feeling or anything, but when people get into that thinking sort of analytical frame of mind, and that's where we were. It was sort of buzzing around, how some of the Aussies say it was banging around in my head. It was kind of doing that, and we just kept thinking about it and thinking about it, and and I kept going to the pantry and looking at the pantry, and I thought, oh, we've just done a shop, like last week we just did a big shopping, and there was chips and this and that in the cupboard, and then I went to the fridge, and we've still got a bit of this and bit of that, and then again, that day we finished work and whatever and came inside, and again just watched any video that we could about Carnivore. I can't even remember at this point who we watched or what videos we watched, because we were just clicking and watching. By Thursday, my husband and I just looked at each other and we said, we're going to do it. Let's do it. And he said, okay. And he said, well, what are we going to do? And I said, well, listen, we're kind of at the end of the shop now. Like we've got a half a loaf of bread sort of thing. And we've got a couple of bits of this and a couple of bits of that. And I said, obviously it's cost of living and everything. I don't want to waste it. I don't want to just chuck it away. But let's, eat what we've got left over. And that's it. The next shopping we do is not going to be, we're going to make sure we're not buying all the extra stuff. He said, yep, I agree. That was Thursday. So Friday, we straight away went to Costco the next morning and went and bought about 50 kilos of meat. And, but at that point, we had heard about everything from lion diet to dirty carnivore. So we knew about, the benefits of each different one. And we sort of said, well, just to be fair on ourselves, because we're making such a big change in our life, we're just going to make sure we've got a bit of everything, especially things that we like. So, for example, like, in my family growing up, we didn't eat a lot of beef. We had a lot of pork and chicken, but not a lot of beef and not a lot of fish, and definitely no lamb because my dad and I don't like lamb. But beef was just something we didn't eat a lot. Although as an adult, I sort of did eat more beef, but again, it was only very specific things, like a specific cut of steak. I just didn't like the taste. I could take it or leave it, sort of thing. So we just made sure that we got the beef that we knew we'd eat. We got the like pork belly. Love pork belly. I can eat it every day. We made sure we got pork belly, and we got things that we knew would be easy for us to eat without having too much of an issue. So that was the Friday. That was that day. And I don't think we weighed ourselves or did anything sort of in the beginning. It took us probably about 4 days, and we went, oh, we should take a photo and take our measurements and that kind of thing. And then we did that 4 days later, and I used the journal app in my iPhone, and I was just recording, a bit of video or a bit of, this is what our measurements were. These are photos, blah, blah, blah. So we did that. And, that the leftover sort of bits of food that we had, that sort of what I said before, the half loaf of bread, this, that, and the other, that went pretty quickly. Like we just made sure we just ate it for each meal. We got rid of it, got out of it. But from that Monday, when we had first started watching content, we had switched to as many meals as we could, as much carnivore as we could anyway. So we had kind of started straight away, but it was more about we didn't want to waste what we'd already purchased, kind of thing. And so we just wanted to make sure we finished that. So technically I'm going to say the first week started, and that was really probably about 95% carnivore, where we, just made sure that, we weren't, once we ate that, whatever the veggie was or whatever, we didn't replenish it in the fridge again. So that first week was really just a slow transition for us. And I think we weighed ourselves, and I lost something like 0.8 kilos, and my husband lost a kilo or 1.2 kilos or something. And, it was like, okay, well, we're just starting. By the 10th day, I was already down 5.8 kilos, and he was down by something like four and a half or 5 kilos or something. And we went, oh, wow, this is working, And for me, as someone who's had some of my health issues, I'm one of those that I've tried every diet in the sun, up to the point I've had weight loss surgery. I've had the majority of my stomach removed about 14 years ago. And this was the first time in my life that I was on some kind of a diet or eating plan, and I didn't feel hungry. I didn't feel as if I was missing out. And I didn't feel, it's that adage of when someone takes something away from you, you suddenly want to eat that, or when you're supposed to fast for a religious holiday, suddenly you're like, oh, I want to eat that food, like, oh, what, you can't go 24 hours and just fast, So it was the first time I just felt content. Like I didn't feel as if I was missing out. I didn't feel as if I was malnourished. I didn't feel as if I was craving, something. I just felt fine. And so that's basically how our carnivore journey started. And then from then on, we just made an effort to probably once a week, we just weighed ourselves and measured ourselves to see how it was going, and, go through each steps. And of course, thankfully, we had a lot of resources in the form of all the videos on YouTube right now of everyone's story, talking about sort of what to expect. So I think Kerry actually had 1 or 2 videos that were sort of like, the phases of carnivore, what to expect, because we didn't know what to expect. Like we didn't know about oxalate dumping. Suddenly we're learning about oxalate dumping. We didn't know about carb cravings. Suddenly we're learning about carb cravings. And actually the way we learned about carb cravings was, we'd make food and we'd eat it, and a couple of hours later we'd both be sort of like, oh, I want to eat something. And so I made sure in the fridge we always had boiled eggs, salami, cheese, just something that you can grab, right? And both of us sort of, were like, oh, I could probably have something. And then we'd go and have, a bite of boiled egg or something. And you instantly felt that feeling of, well, no, I'm actually full. I don't need to eat this. So it was Googling why is this happening? Why are we, you know, sort of reaching for food, but we're not really hungry. Our body's signaling that we're full. And then, that's when we found out, I think it was Dr. Berry or one of the doctor's videos that said, no, that's a carb craving. That's actually what happens when you're going through detoxing from carb cravings. So that was the month of March, and our dog had her first litter of puppies at the very end of March. And yeah, she had 11 puppies, big, beautiful litter. But there is no chance that I could have survived that because it was also pre-winter in Australia. There's no chance I would have been able to survive day on day if I was not carnivore, because 11 puppies, schlepping them inside and out, picking them in and out of the whelping box, cleaning them, multiple times a day, playing with them, being outside with them, looking after them, taking them to the vet, all that kind of stuff. For the first 8 weeks, it was physically taxing on our bodies. And on top of that, we were upgrading the side fence. Actually, we're doing the back fence now, but because we're on acreage, but we were doing the side fence. And we had heaps of people here trying to help us get it done as fast as possible because we had these puppies and rah, rah, rah. But there's no chance that I would have survived that time period when we had puppies if I wasn't carnivore. So we've been on it. I've been on carnivore now a full, I'd say about 9 months. So the 1st of May is when I started. My husband was on carnivore for 4 or 5 months. He lost significantly too much weight for his body. And then he got off carnivore and said it was the worst thing that ever happened. And I can explain sort of what happened with him as well. But then he's been back on carnivore now since the first week of December, and he's thriving. And we are both thriving.
So just to clarify, when you said your husband said it's the worst thing that ever happened, he wasn't referring to carnivore, he was
No,
referring to falling off.
yes.
Right.
So he had lost 30 kilos in 3 months, not intentionally. He never started carnivore to lose weight. He was 100.5 kilos when we started, and he got down to 73 or something, 72. For his body, that was too much. He's 6'1". It was too much, but also he started looking very unwell, and he was basically malnourished. And the only reason he was malnourished, and why I think it's important to talk about, is he does have severe ADHD, and he's on quite a high dose of stimulant medication every day. And what was happening was his medicine makes it so he can't eat, and so he just wasn't hungry. And so he couldn't eat, and he couldn't even force himself to eat. So he was losing weight. Yes, he was losing weight from carnivore, but he probably lost more because he wasn't actually eating. It wasn't actually as a result of being on carnivore. And then that sort of ended up becoming quite bad, because when he went back onto sort of a normal diet, he was eating carbs, sugars, junky food, that kind of thing. And he actually developed depression, which I can go and talk about later, which he has never had before. So that was actually interesting to see what happened. And he just became very unwell when he went back onto the diet. All the aches and pains that he'd lost all came back. He had to start wearing his glasses again. Within 4 days, he had to start wearing his glasses again, which he basically stopped wearing his glasses, when he was full on carnivore. And just, yeah, it was a really bad period of time for him health wise. And so when we got him back onto carnivore, he started thriving again, to the point, and again, I can go into this in more depth later, that he has now had his medication reduced. He's on 90 milligrams a day of stimulant medication. He's now had, because there's 2 different medications, he's now had the short acting one removed. He only has the long acting one, and the long acting one is still actually too strong. But he's working with his doctor in managing that. Thankfully, he's got a holistic, for lack of a better word, a holistic psychiatrist who's willing to look at all of life, all of what you're doing in your life as a way to deal with the ADHD, not just prescribe medication. And so he's fantastic, because he's actually working with him to look at that in a better way. But I can go into that a little bit more, because there's a lot more sort of information that that can relate to that. Yeah.
Wow. So that's awesome. But what interests me is how so he handled carnivore better the second time because just by virtue of the fact that the medications were reduced, and then so that
Correct.
kind of stimulated his appetite.
Correct. So what actually happened is probably the week before he returned back to full-time carnivore, he had already started weaning himself into more carnivore meals. So dinner was all carnivore, let's say, but breakfast maybe he was still having some toast with bacon and eggs, right? So he had definitely gone from, let's say, eating pizzas and eating sandwiches and stuff, which he was on in that period when he took himself off carnivore, just a normal diet, um, he had started weaning himself off anyway. So what happened, excuse me, what happened is he had started sort of gradually weaning himself on. And what we did, I know that all the doctors will say, don't worry about calorie counting and everything. But I think for him, we had to do it because we had to visually see what that looked like. So we worked out sort of what his activity levels were, what the amount of calories was that he's supposed to have, on a carnivore diet. And then we worked out, okay, well, we don't want him to lose weight. We just want him to maintain his current weight. I think he's about 87 kilos now. So he definitely didn't regain back up to 100, but he did regain a little bit. And so we basically started looking at, what sort of amount of calories was needed. I think the calculator sort of said about 2,500 calories or more for him per day. And then we started, so when I made breakfast or when I made dinner, I started weighing every piece of meat, food, and working out what the caloric density was and what the macros were of those meals. So he tries and gets about 1,200 calories in the morning and then 1,500 plus at night. And we have found that has been perfect for him. He fluctuates a little bit in weight, but it's by a kilo or two, and it depends if he's had a very busy day. Obviously it's summer now, it's southeast Queensland, it's quite humid as well, so you can lose a lot of weight in a day just by being outside and working, just naturally, right? So, we don't sort of fuss about that too much. We just make sure that each plate of food that he has the minimum amount of calories for him to eat that day. And as a result of that, as I said, he has reduced the prescribed amount of medication that he needs to use per day. He went through a period of 2 weeks, probably a week ago, so let's say 3 weeks ago, of 2 weeks where he did not take his medicine at all. He did not have any adverse reactions. So he did not have the major mood swings that can happen sometimes in people that have pretty severe ADHD. Things like RSD, which is rejection sensitivity dysphoria, he did not suffer from that, which is where if you say, oh, you didn't do that right, they take that as like, you just told me that I'm the most awful person. And it's like an overreaction of something. So all of those extremes in emotion and extremes in moods, gone. The only reason I knew, obviously, that he hadn't taken his medication because he wasn't reaching for the cupboard to take the medication out, and because he kept talking over me. And that, that's sort of the sign that I knew, because I'd be saying something, he'd be like, talking over me, which is quite a common thing. But he had no desire or need. He didn't feel like he needed to take it. He felt like for small tasks, he had adequate levels of focus. And he also just felt that he could proceed throughout the day without necessarily needing to rely on that to be able to give him that quality of life, to be able to get that focus. So in the last week, he has taken his medication, but that's because, as I said, we're doing over 140 meters of fence. And it's been blistering hot, and we're sort of trying to get it done and all that kind of stuff. So he has taken it because he's needed it, because he's needed to focus on setting up everything correctly and making sure all the measurements are correct and not getting swayed by, oh, what's that shiny thing over there, which tends to happen sometimes for him. So it has been amazing. It has been absolutely amazing. He has been able to have both of his meals during the day. And then he takes his medication. He's able to work all day, gets it all out, gets everything done that he needs to, feels really accomplished as well, and then can come in and have a really big meal and not feel, sort of heavy or bloated or overly tired or anything like that. So this second time around for him has been absolutely instrumental in improving his mental health. As I said, when he took himself off carnivore, because he had lost too much weight. And we at that point, we didn't know it was because he wasn't taking in enough nutrition. It was just, well, something's happening, and we sort of didn't know. We were like, well, maybe it's because you've detoxed your body so much, and and we don't know what's happening, and maybe some other thing is coming up, some other kind of ailment or something that's maybe been masked by other things. Maybe that's come up and we didn't know, and he sort of said, look, I just have to stop carnivore for a little bit. Now we've been together for 21 years, and obviously he was late diagnosed with his ADHD. He was diagnosed about 7 years ago. So I've been living with him for a long time when he's had obviously ADHD, but he has never ever had depression in his life. Never. Anxiety and depression are comorbidities of ADHD. So generally, people that do have ADHD have an increased likelihood of having depression and anxiety. Yes, he does get a little bit anxious, and that's always been that way. But he never ever had depression. And even if something went wrong or something didn't go the right way or whatever, he might get a bit sad about it for an hour or two. But then it's like, oh well, life moves on, and he was always able to pick himself up and continue. So he fell into a very, very deep depression like he's never been that way before. And then he sort of realized, he said, well, wait a minute, this has been happening since I took myself off carnivore. And because of course there's all this, and I'm going to call it anecdotal for now, just because there's no sort of medical or scientific, or there's very little medical or scientific research behind a lot of the success stories of carnivore at the moment. But we know it's true. We know that people are curing anxiety, they're curing depression, they're curing diabetes, they're curing arthritis, osteoarthritis, osteoporosis, PCOS. People are curing all these things that they've been told that they can't cure. So I kept saying to him, factually, this doesn't make sense. How is it that you've come off carnivore and you've never been depressed in your life ever, and suddenly this depression has come along? Um, and then that made us sort of go, oh, wait a minute, maybe it happened because you went off carnivore actually. And then we said, look, worst thing we can try is just to get you back on carnivore. What's the worst that can happen? Obviously with the intent just to make sure that each meal that he's getting has enough caloric density in there. And we did, and it was gone like that. Within 5 days of coming back onto carnivore, that sort of darkness, that dark cloud that was above him, gone. And so I think it's important to talk about that, because so far, to my knowledge, and I could be corrected, correct me if I'm wrong, but there hasn't been a lot of discussion or proof of it working on adults. Yes, there's a lot of people talking about how carnivore and keto is helping kids with ADHD and autism and that kind of thing, but we haven't found a lot of stories about adults with ADHD and how it's benefited them. And that's why I really wanted to sort of talk with you as well today, because I wanted to sort of start getting that message out about how carnivore can actually help people that are neurodivergent, adults that are neurodivergent. So, as I said, he still does have a prescribed medication, but he's taking significantly less to what it was. Not just in terms of dose, but in terms of frequency. He just doesn't need it. He just finds that he can, cope without it, kind of thing. And that's been a game changer for us. Like when we saw in person that change and how that impacted him, there's no going back now. For him,
So,
definitely no going back.
so that lower dose that he is taking now, is that he's almost taking that now as a more of an as needed basis
Correct.
rather than a I need to take this every day.
Yeah, correct. So I remember he explained to me when he first started seeing, when he first got diagnosed and everything, and the doctor talked to him about medication, and they started trialing which medication was going to work, and then they sort of have a follow up, and they said, how do you feel? And I remember at the time he said, it's completely changed my life because I can actually get things done, and blah blah blah, and I've got focus, and I can, I don't wander off like a butterfly, and I can actually, when I start a project, I can finish that project, and all of these things. And he said quality of life, it improved a lot. But then, of course, you have to keep titrating the dose up and up and up until you find a dose that works. And, after a period of time, honestly, it took years. It took about 4 or 5 years to find a dose that worked and would stabilize him. And he's been on that same dose now for a couple of years. So, that's when he started realizing, well, wait a minute, that quality of life that I got when I first went on medication, I've kind of almost got it back, and I'm not on medication. And all I did was change to a carnivore diet. And not just that, but that sort of what I said before, I notice because he'll talk over me. But even that is just not as pronounced a symptom as it used to be. So before he had his diagnosis and before we knew that he had ADHD, he was always like that. And I used to think to myself, oh my God, what, doesn't this guy get it? He's constantly talking over everyone. And I'd constantly be like, stop, let them talk, because people would be talking and he just, and I'd be like, stop, let them talk. And then obviously he got diagnosed and we went, oh my God, it makes so much sense, right? But that was such a pronounced thing on him that anyone, like we had a friend who was a school teacher, and we had told him, we said, oh, he just got diagnosed with ADHD. He's like, oh, I thought you knew. And we went, what? And he said, I could see it a mile away. So people that were experienced in working with kids or other adults that had ADHD saw it a mile away on him, but we didn't see it for a long time. And then obviously, once we saw and he got his diagnosis and everything, we started learning about it and learning how to deal with it. So even those pre-diagnosis things that used to be symptoms that were very pronounced, they're just not as pronounced as they used to be. So yeah, he still has ADHD. He will always have ADHD. He'll never not have it. But if he's been able to reduce the severity of symptoms, reduce the requirement to have to take a stimulant medication every day, then that's amazing. And then the other thing, sorry, I wanted to add to that. So we both recently had blood tests done. So I've got PCOS. I basically got, well, I knew something was weird because when I was 11 years old and got my period, it didn't come correctly. It was sort of 5 weeks the next time it came. And I said to my mum, I remember saying to my mum, something's wrong. When we learnt in school, they said it's supposed to come every 28 days and blah, blah, blah. And she said, all right, let's go to the doctor. And the doctor said, he said, no, it's okay. First period, it's not going to be, it's not going to be accurate. It has to settle in, blah, blah, blah. And then the next one didn't come for 2 months. And so again, we went back to the doctor. Okay, the period didn't come again. Oh, it'll regulate itself and it's just the first one. And, but instantly when that happened, I started gaining weight. So obviously women that have PCOS, the reason you gain weight is because your hormones start fluctuating, and basically you gain weight. You can literally starve yourself and not eat anything, but you'll still gain weight because your hormones are out of balance and you've got insulin resistance. And obviously that creates issues like infertility, your period doesn't come regularly, all that kind of stuff. So I struggled with that for many, many years. And as I said, even as a kid, I did all the diets. I did the shakes diet. I did Weight Watchers points with my mum and this and that and the other. And then it wasn't until I was 21 and went and saw a specialist doctor. And I said, and also, Dave, this was in the time where there was no such thing as Googling, right? Like, I think I was like 12 when AOL came out, dial-up internet. So, what was I going to get? The Encyclopedia Britannica and search for keywords? Like, that didn't happen at the time, right? So by the time I was sort of 21, that was, I'd finished my degree and that's when things were starting. The internet was a lot more accessible and, all that kind of stuff. And I just remember Googling, right? Googling stuff and Googling my symptoms. And I saw this thing, PCOS, and I was like, I've got all those things. So I went to this doctor and I spoke with her and I said, I think I've got PCOS. And she said, why? And I said, all these things, blah, blah, blah. And she said, yeah, we've got to do these tests. So anyway, did the test. She confirmed, this other doctor confirmed, yeah, I've got PCOS. And then but even before then, as I said, I'd been on every single diet. Like every diet you could think of that's out there, I had tried it at some point in time. And it works for 3 months and then it doesn't. And then your period comes finally and then it puts your hormones out of whack. Then you gain the weight and lose the weight. And all of this stuff kept happening. And then so I decided, look, the only thing I can do is have weight loss surgery. That's the only thing I can do. It's the only way I'm going to force my body into some kind of way that it has no choice but to lose weight. Like I've got no other choice unless and as I said, PCOS is one of those things that even if you didn't eat, you'd still gain weight because it has to do with your insulin and all this kind of stuff and periods and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, the only way I can do it is if I physically don't have the space in my stomach anymore. So went through that whole process, ended up having weight loss surgery. I had a sleeve surgery, removed, it was like 80% of my stomach. And yes, I did lose weight. That first probably 6 months, I lost 45 kilos. And I thought, yeah, this is fantastic. And then I had to go for a checkup with my surgeon, and he said, "Oh, how's everything going?" I said, "Yeah, everything's good." Oh, the only thing I noticed, I said, was my period came 3 weeks ago, and it's been here for 3 weeks. And he didn't even blink twice. He said, "Come with me right now." Took me up to his colleague, who was a OBGYN, and they said, "No, you have to have a hormonal IUD put in to regulate your periods." From that point on, I was unable to lose a single kilo of weight for years. That was probably 2014, 2015. It didn't matter what I did. I could not lose weight ever again. I stayed at that weight, couldn't lose weight. It didn't matter what I did. I could have run 5Ks every day. I would not have lost the weight. Not just that, after a period of time, I started having, I want to say sort of phantom symptoms, but weird things kept happening and I couldn't tie them to a specific thing. Like if you're someone who suffers from allergies and you've got an itchy nose, your first thought is, okay, there's an allergen out, there's a pollen or there's something, and that's why I've got an itchy nose, right? But this was like weird things that sort of weren't linked to anything. And so I said, I'm done. I'm done with this stupid thing. I started reading about women that were having adverse reactions, and I said, get it out. And so I went to the doctor. I said, I don't want this. Just get it out of my body. That was just before I started weightlifting, actually. So it was sort of that 2015, 2016 period of time. And then I started weightlifting and was on a keto diet and was just naturally intermittent fasting. I was practicing weightlifting, fasted and whatever. And I think I lost probably about 18 kilos in fat, but I was also very strong. Like I was, I didn't necessarily look like I'd lost a lot of weight because I was quite thick still. I still had, I was quite muscly, quite strong, really strong legs, really strong arms, and was doing that and, felt amazing, felt very strong, felt very powerful, but still did not feel at optimum health levels. It wasn't until I started Carnivore that literally 30 plus years of struggling with PCOS, insulin resistant, PMS. PMS was so debilitating that the day would come and I would be in the bed. I would pass out from pain. And I'm allergic to a lot of medication, so I couldn't even take any medication. So it was just a matter of struggling through it. And anyway, Carnivore came along. I was on Carnivore. And prior to that, I had injured myself at weightlifting. So the last 2 years of my weightlifting time that I was doing weightlifting, I'd actually dislocated my patella. I was in a 125 kilo squat, back squat, and I was coming up out of the squat. And I had a spotter. I had my coach there. He was spotting me. And all I heard was like a pop. And I said, oh. And he said, "You all right?" And I said, "Yeah, I think my knee just made a sound." And he's like, "All right, let's get you, you're done. That's it, finish. Let's get the bar off. No more training." Got up and I was like, "Oh, it's a bit, just a bit sort of sore and tender." That was it. I couldn't do anything. The next day, my knee was swollen like a basketball, full of fluid. Went and got MRIs, tests done. I dislocated my patella, and I was like, "Well, you're not going to make me stop weightlifting, because I love it so much, and I really do love it still." So, I was just working with physios and chiropractors and coaches and modifying my training program and this, that, and the other. But I had constant pain in my knee all the time, constant. Anytime I bent my leg, which is like, how often do you bend your leg? All the time. You're walking up steps, you're bending your knee. You're walking down the steps, you're bending. There's a lot of movement that you do that's a lot of natural movement that you feel you just can't do it. So I was dragging that along, and I was in Canberra for a period of time. I was seeing specialist trainers, professionals, working on my knee. Nothing got better. It'll get better for a little bit. They'd do their thing, and the next day it would just be painful. And I thought, I'm just going to have to suffer with this pain forever. And just before I started Carnivore, my GP at the time, the one I was seeing at the time, said, "You're probably going to have surgery to anchor your patella, basically to your kneecap, because it's obviously moving, and the tendon, the one that comes like from your hip down to your knee, it keeps moving. That's what's causing the pain, this, that, and the other." And I thought, I'm 40 years old. I don't want to go through and have surgery on my knee because I'll never be able to use it the same again. I'll never be able to use it, right? I'm never going to have the same mobility. Yeah, I'm going to have a functional knee, but I'm never going to have, be able to use it again. And anyway, my husband had a knee reconstruction, I think the second year of COVID, so 2021. And one day, sort of week 5-ish, he said, "Oh, I noticed my knee doesn't hurt anymore." And I went, "Oh, wait a minute. And I started, with my knee, and I said, my knee doesn't hurt either. Like, I didn't even feel that it had happened. It had just stopped. So I went from being told my patella is going to have to be surgically anchored to my knee, like my kneecap, that whole frame around my leg, to the pain had gone. I could have, if I didn't know about Carnivore, or hadn't been on Carnivore and seen the benefits it was having on me, I could have very well undergone a completely unnecessary surgical procedure that was fixed by eating meat and eating an animal-based diet. So we recently had our blood tests. So every year I used to have to get iron infusions. I was chronically low on iron, below the low number. So, you've always got a range. I was always underneath the low number. Last year, there was a period, probably about middle of last year. No, sorry, I think it was the year before. One day I got up and I was just dizzy. Everything was dizzy and I had no energy and I was stumbling around. And I said to my husband, I've got to go lay down. Something's wrong. And so I went and lay down. I couldn't lift my head off the pillow. I was so weak. And our neighbor raced over because he has diabetes and he's got the machine to check his sugar. My sugar was 1.9. My blood sugar was 1.9. And he said, quickly get her some juice, get her something. You've got to lift her sugar up because it's critical, like it's too low. And so he did that. My husband gave me sort of something, and I felt a little bit better, but not 100%. So in the meantime, he called our doctor, and doctor said, bring her in. I've got to do some blood tests and whatever. So he did a blood test and saw that, my iron levels were low. I was basically anemic. Like my iron was underneath the low levels. And he gave me an iron infusion. So, but I have been having iron infusions yearly, probably for the last 10 years or so. A couple of weeks ago, I went to my new GP. It's my husband's doctor, who he loves and thinks is fantastic. And so I sort of switched over to him too. And I went to him, excuse me, and I said, listen, this is what used to happen before. I used to have, yearly iron infusions. I was basically anemic, really bad periods, blah, 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 PCOS, PMS. And I said, I've been on the carnivore diet now sort of 8-ish months. And I just want to see what my levels are. I said, because the last time I did it, I was really unwell. So on top of that, because I had sleeve surgery, I was told at the time I had sleeve surgery that I'd have to supplement vitamin B12 and vitamin D for the rest of my life, because I've removed so much of my stomach that nothing gets absorbed anymore. That's what I was told. And I'm a really crappy patient, to be brutally honest, Dave, because I hate taking pills. I don't like. They always get stuck in my throat, and I just don't like it. I've always sort of been like, my body will fix itself, and I only take medicine if I absolutely have to. And so my new doctor knew all this. He had my history and had everything, and he did the blood test, and he's like, come in, I want to talk to you. And I said, yeah, all right. So anyway, went in there, and he said, because we had said to him, I said to him, I'm on carnivore, and please don't tell me to change my diet, because I will not change my diet for anything or anyone, and I will remain on carnivore. And he said, that's fine. I support you as long as we keep a tab sort of on how you're going, right? And I said, yep, that's great. So he said, if I didn't see these results, he said, I wouldn't believe it. He said, your vitamin B12 is in the normal range. And he said, you told me you don't take vitamin B12 supplements. I said, no, I absolutely hate pills. I refuse to take them. He said, well, the only way that you could have got that if you're not taking supplements is through meat. And he said, your vitamin D is normal. I said, you're joking. He said, no. He said, you have normal vitamin D, normal range vitamin D. He said, I tested your red and white blood cell count. He said, you are no longer anemic. He said, I have your previous results from your previous GP, and I can see the numbers. And he says, what's more is, he said, if I didn't know that you had sleeve surgery, I wouldn't have believed these results. He said, because we are told, and the surgeons that do weight loss surgery, are also sort of experienced in that sort of, topic. And he goes, we're always told that people that have weight loss surgery will need to supplement vitamin B12 and vitamin D for the rest of their life. He said, based on your results now, he said, you're either out in the sun every day, he said, or you're supplementing. And I said, I'm not doing either, because number one, it's Queensland, right? Middle of summer, it's boiling hot. You don't go out in this kind of weather. And I said, number two, I hate pills. I refuse to take pills if I don't have to. And he's like, I'm blown away. And then he said, you don't need to have an iron infusion. He said, your iron levels are completely normal. And he's like, I've got your old doctor's results. He said, I know that you are having, he's like, I've got your past results. He said, I can see what's happening. from your past to your current. And then he left cholesterol for the very end, right? So he went through everything. He's like, everything's good, everything's good. And then he said, okay, cholesterol. I said, oh, I'm interested in this number. And he said, it's showing up as red, in the marker thing. He said, it's 5.9, my cholesterol. And I said, okay, I don't care. And he goes, I'm not concerned. He goes, and I'll tell you why I'm not concerned. He said, and he had this sort of little calculator almost thing inbuilt in their sort of app that they have that they're working on. And he said, I can change all these things. He said, so your blood pressure is normal. It was 117, I think, over whatever. I didn't see the bottom number. He said, that's normal. He said, your cholesterol, 5.9. He goes, I can put all these values in this little calculator. And he did. He put everything in there. And at the bottom, there's this big red font and big red thing. And it says 0% chance of cardiovascular disease or illness. And he said, okay. He said, see this? He goes, this is why I'm not concerned that your cholesterol is 5.9. He said, because this suggests, based on this little calculator, however it's made up with whatever sort of segments of data that they use, he said that there's 0% chance of you developing cardiovascular disease. He said, let's just show, for example, that I change it. He goes, let's change your cholesterol to 6.2. Let's change your blood pressure to 150, and let's tick that you're a smoker. And live, as I was sitting there, it went up to 3%. And he said, obviously, when factors in our life change, this will increase the risk. He said, but based on your test results now as they are, he said, you have no risk. He said, not just that, you are no longer insulin resistant. And he said, tell me about your periods. And I said, well, they come and go like the wind. I don't even realize that they come. I don't have any pain. I don't have that debilitating pain of I can't move. I'm hunched over. I'm in so much pain. I don't have any more cysts. The only way I know is because I've been recording when I get it on my iPhone for so long that I get a notification saying, oh, your period's going to come in about 5 days. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, whatever. But again, it comes and goes like the wind. It's not a big deal. It's, there's no pain, there's no discomfort, there's no nothing, which so many women are reporting. I don't know necessarily about women with endometriosis, but at least women who have PCOS. I've noticed a bit of an uptick in especially stuff on YouTube where women are saying, I do have PCOS and this is how Carnivore has helped me. So I'm just adding my voice, to that chorus of women as well. But when it came to my husband's results, right, his doctor said to him, okay, let's test he had to have an ECG obviously as well because of the medication that he's on. ECG came back normal. His blood pressure was something like 100 or 101 or something. And the doctor said to him, have you taken your medication today? And he said, yeah. And he said, wow. He said, because I've got your previous test results. He said, your pre-carnivore test results, you were always sitting at about 140-ish, your blood pressure, because he's also on because he's on stimulant medication, 90 milligrams of stimulant medication. Well, that was the before dose. So he always tracked very, very high. And he's someone, because he's worked in mining forever and a day, he's always had medical tests and ECGs and that kind of stuff. So he's always rated high because of his medication. And so it was interesting that the doctor said to him, did you take your medication today? And he said, yeah. And he's like, this is not, he said, I wouldn't know. Based on this measure, I wouldn't know that you have taken that. Everything was normal for him. There was nothing that was low or high. Everything was mid-range. He said, looking at this test, he's like, you're 46. He's like, but looking at this test, I think I was looking at a 30-year-old. He said, that's how good your insides are. And his cholesterol was only 4.0 or 4.1 or something. And he said to my doctor, I'm jealous, like to our doctor. He said, I'm jealous. He said, because, my wife is pretty clever. And so the fact that her cholesterol is high just means that she's got more fat in her brain. She'll be even more clever. And I said, well, you're getting there too, mate. It's all right. Like you've got 4.0, like you're kind of there. But for us, it was really pivotal. And it actually, because along our carnivore journey, it's hard not to get preachy about it. And watching Kerry, right, because he's so enthusiastic and exuberant about carnivore, and that is what motivated us for so long, and probably motivates so many people that are on the carnivore journey, because he's just constantly talking about your life will get better. So we spoke to all our friends and family about carnivore when we started, and there was only one couple that started at the same time as we did. Older couple as well. He's come off Nexium. He was drinking Nexium for acid reflux. He's totally come off Nexium. He's dropped down from like a 36 to size 32 pants, so he's pretty excited because he's redoing his Harley now, and he could get into his old leather pants. So he's pretty wrapped. He's like, I'm going to look great in my pants, kind of thing. And his wife as well just recently had some tests, and her doctor said, "Oh, your cholesterol's high. We should put you on this medication." She said, "Absolutely not. Do not touch me. I'm not drinking your medication." But both of them have experienced such huge benefits to their life. So recently, I actually finally convinced my mum and dad as well to get onto carnivore. And because my mum's got so many different ailments. She's poor thing. She's had both of her hips replaced, both of her knees replaced. She recently had carpal tunnel surgery on her right wrist, and the recovery from that has been really painful for her. But she's also just had, issues with like osteoarthritis and all this. And she's not old. She's 66, so she's not old. She's got so much life left in her. And after we had our test results done, I called my parents straight away and I said, "You two have to seriously consider going on carnivore. You have a grandson, my nephew. He's 8 years old. He's full of beans, keeps them on their toes. He's there with them all the time. Every weekend my nephew is there, and you have to be there for him. Like, you, if nothing, do it for being able to see him and participate in him with his life and what he's going to be doing with his life, because he's going to want you guys to go everywhere with him." And so they've been on slightly over a week now. My dad said he noticed his taste buds have changed, and he said, some cheeses that I used to be able to eat, I can't eat them anymore because they're quite strong tasting, or I can taste like some sourness in it. My dad's always had a very sensitive nose and sensitive taste. My dad never used to eat steak. He's now venturing into eating steak, which is really, really good. And I said to them, take it slow, don't rush. This is your journey. Some people can go hard, right? Some people can just go line diet straight away and go really hard. Others can't, and take it at your own pace. And so my dad said, we went to the pub on Saturday night with friends. And prior to that, he goes, we checked the menu. They had like a tomahawk steak with prawns on it and, something or other. And he said, I just flat out said, yeah, I'll order that. But I won't ask for the chips or anything. And then he goes, but we got there to the pub, and he said, I saw the chips and they had a gravy and whatever. And he said, I didn't ask them to remove the chips. He said, I had one beer and a handful of chips, 10 chips. He said, I paid for it the next day. I was in so much pain. I felt so uncomfortable. I was constipated. He said, I just did not like that. And he goes, honestly, he's like, I'll never do it again. And I was like, well, sometimes you need to do that, like sometimes you need to, because you think, oh, it's not going to hurt, I'll have a bit of this or I'll have a bit of that. And, you end up in a world of hurt kind of thing. So, so they've been on carnivore slightly over a week. They've both actually lost more weight in their first week than my husband and I did, because as I said, mine was 0.8, his was like 1. Mum lost 2 kilos apparently, and dad lost about 1.5 kilos. And I said to them, you just got to keep at it. You'll get to the point. You'll just get to the point with carnivore that it's just second nature. In the same way that you used to eat vegetables before and grains and pasta and whatever, this will just become, the way you eat. You just don't think about it, and because I know my mum said that, she's like, I love a good loaf of bread, when you walk past the bakery, a fresh loaf and it smells nice and warm, and she's like, I just love it. And she goes, that's my biggest fear. And I said, honestly, sort of when you hit that 5-6 week mark, when you've already gone through a lot of your detoxing and your expelling of gunk, I said, you'll just get to the point that you can walk past the bakery and the smell won't trigger you. Like, there's just nothing in there anymore in your body. That craving for those carbs and those things has gone. That bacteria has been flushed out of your system.
There's a point she'll get to where she walks past that bakery when it smells like sugar and chemicals.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So it's not just necessarily the, that inviting nostalgic smell of, oh, warm bread and butter and, blah, blah, blah. It'll get to that point where it just smells like chemicals and grossness, And so I think my dad seems to be going through that a little bit faster than my mum. But my mum has, as I said, she's had so many different like illnesses and ailments and this and that and the other. I think for her, it's just going to take the prescribed time. Like dad seems to be sort of plowing through it. His body's just going through all the motions that sort of might happen at week 3 and 4. It's happening for him already. Whereas for mum, it's going to be a little bit slower. And I said to her, look, that's what happened with us. My husband just plowed through it. You know, he started seeing benefits that I didn't see for a long time, but I also had a lot more healing to do in my body. And you just kind of have to not, you know, what's that phrase? Comparison is the, I don't even know what it is. Comparison is the
Oh yeah, I'm not sure, but
um
I know basically what you're about to say.
mm,
It's like when you're comparing yourself, like you end up.
correct. You know, it's the worst thing that you can do. Like, don't compare yourself to others because your journey is going to be different. Your ailments are going to be different, and that's what I was sort of like. I had a discussion with mum and dad the other day because, you know, when we talk, it's like a FaceTime or we're all on loudspeaker. So it's like, you know, my husband and I and my mum and dad, and we're all on loudspeaker. So it's like we're sitting together talking, you know. And you know, we were sort of comparison is the thief of joy. That's the phrase. But anyway, you know, we were all sort of talking, and I said, you know, this when we go through whatever reason we've gained this weight or become this sick way, it's irrelevant, right? At the end of the day, this is the body that we are dealing with, you know, the sick body, right? And we're all going to take different paths. It's going to take a different set of time to go through healing that body. And mum said something like, oh, she said, but you know, all our bodies are different and blah, blah. And I said, yeah, 100%, I acknowledge that. I said, but this is why carnivore is so amazing, because you've got people, men, women, it doesn't matter your sex, it doesn't matter your socioeconomic background, it doesn't matter your level of intelligence or education, it doesn't matter what part of the world you reside in. You can reside in Northern Europe, you can reside in South America, you can reside in Australia. It doesn't matter. Every single person, regardless of body type, regardless of ailment, age, you know, all of those factors that we identify ourselves by, all of us are healing our bodies because of carnivore. And I think that that's the strength of carnivore, you know, because it's not just helping people with anxiety and depression, or it's not just helping people with type 2 diabetes. You know, it's helping all of these ailments. And I think I actually saw Michaela Peterson just a day or two ago has done an interview with the guy, I think he's Les or Leo Cranmer, I think his name is, I'm not 100% sure, but Kerry mentioned in one of his recent videos that he's doing an interview with him. And the gentleman runs a sort of like an old people's home, and has transferred. I don't know if you've seen that clip of hers where he talks about the Mocha score. He's basically transferred everyone that's in that home to a carnivore diet, and he explains the scale, and it's like 1 to 20 is, you know, full cognitive decline, 21 to 26 is sort of mild cognitive decline, and 27 to 30 is no cognitive decline, just a regular person. And he talks about a patient who was rated 15 on that, so severe cognitive decline, and she had been on carnivore. I can't remember what period of time he said, but it would have been several months, sort of 3 to 6 months, let's say, and she had gone up to a 26. So she was basically severely cognitive decline to basically almost no more cognitive decline. And that just shows you how carnivore is helping people. It doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter if you've got dementia or Alzheimer's, PCOS, you know, if you're neurodivergent, if, you know, it doesn't matter. None of these things matter, because we are healing all of these ailments, you know, in such a natural, unobstructive way. You know, you don't need to exercise. You don't need to calorie count. You don't need to this, that, and the other. You know, you eat all the fat. You know, actually, we stumbled across a video of Dr. Chafee the other day, a short on YouTube, and he must have been working out or something, because you know, he's so ridiculously intelligent and fit, and such a good example of carnivore working. And and he's sort of obviously he's working out or whatever, and he's sweaty and takes his top off, and he said, I eat, and you know, because he's got this fantastic body figure as well, and he said, I eat like 70 or 80% fat. And he said, does my body look, you know, do I look unwell, sort of thing? And it's like, no, you do not look unwell. But you know, that's the point, that you know, you can be someone who's an elite athlete and an elite doctor with this really important job, and you know, where you're looking after people's health and their life, you know, or you can be just someone like me or someone like you that's, you know, a little bit more regular, and it's still helping, you know. So I think that's the important thing about carnivore. I think that's the important thing that people need to really sort of understand. Like it's past the weight loss. Like I lost 30 kilos from the weight that I was. Now that 30 kilos surpassed the lowest weight that I ever was when I was weightlifting and on keto. So I surpassed that. Now in double digits. I'm not in triple digits anymore. I'm now in double digits. I plateaued probably in November, and I haven't been able to lose not a single kilo since then. I sort of lose a kilo, gain a kilo, lose a kilo, gain a kilo. I kind of put that down to two things. I could be maybe not correct in this first one in terms of the factuality of it, but I think what has potentially happened is my metabolism has changed. As I've lost 30 kilos, my metabolism has changed. So, if you were to look at like caloric density of food, I'm now eating, or what I'm consuming now is enough for my body at this weight and this level of expenditure. So I think I'm at the point where I will either have to eat less or exercise more. Because exercising more will increase the amount of calories I need, which will just automatically put me in a sort of deficit, so to speak. I don't think for me, because I've had sleeve surgery and I don't have a stomach, I don't think eating less would be okay. Because yes, my stomach has stretched a little bit since then, but I still can't eat the volume of food that I could eat pre-surgery. So I think for me, eating less is probably not a safe bet. So it might just be more of a matter of, let's say, exercising a little bit more. And I'm pretty active. Like I take my dogs for a walk. I go to yoga every day. I do want to get back into weightlifting, but that's sort of a different thing. So I'm going to kind of tinker with that. And to be honest, we bought a fancy new coffee machine in November, and I've kind of been indulging in coffees a little bit. So I wouldn't even be surprised if, it was just a little bit of that as well. But
Right.
but again, I'm not freaking out about it, because my
Mm.
body is doing what my body needs to do now. If my body needs to lose more weight, it will start losing more weight. If my body wants to go back into OMAD, it'll go back into OMAD. The sheer fact that I haven't gained any of the weight that I lost, and I've basically stabilized and stayed at this weight, that's perfectly fine. I know that my body will continue to lose more weight as it needs to, because I
Right.
probably do have a little bit more to lose. But the best compliment was from friends that went away for overseas for some time, and they came back and they said, "Oh, you just look normal." And not in the sense of, of course they weren't trying to be disrespectful or anything, but it was just like that. You look just like a regular person. You don't look like an obese person or a person, you know, carrying so much excess weight. And as I said, my knee doesn't hurt. I go to the gym all the time. I'm pretty active. I have working dogs. So I'm with my dogs constantly, either exercising or walking or doing this, that, and the other, or working on our little homestead. Like there's constantly something physical to do. And there is no chance that I'd be able to do that if I wasn't carnivore. I would be having
R-
constant lulls, all that kind of stuff.
Um, so, I mean, it's fantastic to hear the results that you and your husband have had.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in, and what other people might be interested in that haven't tried this before, is what does a day's menu look like for both of you? Are you both eating at the same times, and what does it look like?
Yeah, so because he needs to eat quite early, because he's got to take his medication within an hour of eating. We try and get up sort of quite early. I'm usually up early anyway with the dogs. As I said, take the dogs for a walk. I go to yoga and I come back. So I try not to eat before yoga, and I prefer to eat sort of 10-ish. That's my preferred time. If that's it on a yoga day. If I don't have yoga that day, then I'll eat with my husband, and we eat about 6:30 in the morning. We found that if we eat steak in the morning, it's a lot harder. We kind of go into a little bit of a, like you just don't want to necessarily get going for a little bit. And of course, if we've got stuff to do around the place, if we're, as I said, now we're currently fencing, so we do need to get up early and start earlier in the day. So I just find salmon works really good for us in the morning, because it's obviously got all the fat and plus the protein, but it's a lot lighter. It's just a little bit lighter on your stomach. So we always do salmon and eggs for breakfast, either fried eggs or scrambled eggs. And with that, we'll have some yogurt or, just full fat Greek yogurt with it. We don't eat lunch at all. We have these gigantic 2-liter Yetis, and we fill them up with sodi sodi electrolytes. They're an Australian brand. We love them. And we fill that up and we schlep that around the farm all day, and that's what we drink. And obviously on days that are super hot, or like summer days at the moment, we go through a few of those, to be brutally honest. And then dinner comes and it's steak and eggs again. And so, yeah, we'll usually have a Wagyu ribeye or a regular ribeye, depends how generous I'm feeling with the shopping of that week, or, something like that. We also have previously purchased from a farm. It's about 3.5 hours away. It's sort of a little bit more remote. And we do an eighth of a cow and half of a pig, and we get the whole beast. It's just that I find that sometimes with that we might get sort of cuts that we wouldn't normally eat. I personally don't eat lamb. I don't like lamb. I don't like the taste or smell of it. My husband can eat it, but he doesn't because I don't. So we eat chicken sometimes, not too often. Chicken wings we'll have, or chicken thigh. But we'll do a lot of pork in the form of like pork leg roast or pork belly. We don't do any lean cuts, and we do ribeyes and that kind of thing. So that's what our daily eating is. We have breakfast in the morning, super super early, and then we'll eat sort of much later at night, and we can wind down. Yeah, because I just find if you have steak first thing in the morning, I just find I think it's the density of the meat just makes it a little bit, kind of puts you in a bit of a slump because it's processing through your body. So we find it's better to eat steak at night. But yeah, we try and have steak every day as much as we can. Yeah.
It's great to find yourself in a position where you're eating food that you know is nutritionally dense and is good for you, and you're not guessing about what does balanced mean and which vegetable is
Yeah.
better than which other vegetable and all this kind of thing, and is fruit okay, and you're not worried about any of that anymore. You're just eating nutritionally dense food, and you're feeling so much better.
Yeah. Yeah. The feeling better is the kicker, right? Because it doesn't matter. You can have, an awful sleep because it's been too hot all night or whatever it might be. But even that doesn't happen as often. You just sleep through the night. For example, I used to be the type of person that I couldn't get to sleep on time, even if I was tired, because my brain would race. I'd remember something that happened 10 years ago, and then I'd ruminate on it, and then I'd start analyzing this. That's the type of person I was. I could never fall asleep instantly. Now, if I say I'm tired, it's literally I'm tired. I get up and within 5 minutes I'm asleep. I've never been able to do that before. So even things like that you don't think is important. So for example, glasses. I've got a lazy eye and astigmatism, and so I've always had to wear glasses. And every 2 years they increase my prescription amount. And I was working one day on the computer, and I said to my husband, I can't wear these glasses because it was actually giving me a headache. It was too strong. And luckily in my drawer I had glasses from 4 years ago, so 2 prescriptions before. And I put them on and I said, oh, these work now. And he said, but they're your old ones. And I said, yeah, so even things that you don't even think uh, have a benefit from carnivore end up having a benefit from carnivore, you know?
Yeah, it's really nice.
Mm, mm.
So, Teeyana, if people want to reach out to you, how can they get in contact? Do you have any social media or any other way of reaching out?
Yeah, I do. I actually have several social media profiles just because I have so many different things I do. Probably if people are interested more in our carnivore stuff, it's called Stormforge Carnivores. Stormforge is all one word, and I've just listed on there because I did a lot of coaching in my IRL job. Sort of last 10 years. I was in that profession for 17 years, but I did a lot of coaching and mentoring the last 10 years of it. And so when I finished working last year, I actually went and did a coaching certification. So I actually started doing coaching. I want to start doing coaching, looking at like transformation coaching and life coaching and stuff for women. But then I realized sort of the last few days, I was like, wait a minute, I've actually been coaching a lot of people in carnivore at the moment, a lot of our friends and a lot of our family that have decided to take on carnivore. I'm constantly getting messages every day. So now I've actually just added that on there. It's not just our carnivore journey, it's also me reaching out and hoping to help other people through coaching practices, if they're on the carnivore journey. So Stormforge Carnivores is probably the best, but we have lots of ventures that we're involved in. As I said, we breed working European Dobermans. We live on a homestead in southeast Queensland, so we have lots of different profiles and different things that we do in life.
Nice. And Stormforge Carnivores is on YouTube,
Instagram,
Instagram,
Instagram.
Instagram.
Yep, yep,
No
yep.
worries. I'll include that in the show notes.
Mhm.
Teeyana, thank you so much for coming on and sharing you and your husband's stories. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Dave. It was awesome to talk to you.